already. I am going to put some links in the chat as well. Let's see if I can multitask here. I think I can. Oh, maybe not. You'll have to wait till I'm done talking. I have the link to the pledge form. So if you haven't yet been able to submit your pledge, you can do that there. We're asking that everybody complete that by April 10th. In addition to that, I have a link to the sermon from Reverend Eileen on March 20th, specific to our pledge drive. She talks about giving in abundance, and that is our focus this year as we all bloom together. So I will share a link to that sermon as well. And the last thing I want to share with you all is all three of us that are on this pledge team. It is Pat, Mel's, Lynn Overgaard, and myself. I'm going to share our names and our email addresses. So if you have questions, you can contact us. If you would prefer to get a form in the mail, just send us an email and we will drop it in the mail to you. The idea is to make this as easy as possible, and also to hit our goal by hopefully having all of those pledges committed by April 10th. So thank you all so much for your support. UUCC is what it is because of all of us and your generosity. So thank you so very much.
And now we will light our chalice. And if you know the words, please say them along with me. If I can get the candle to light, if I can get the lighter to light. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. And now some opening words from Lynn.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be back with you. This morning, our words come from Arundhati Roy. She said, our strategy should be not only to confront empire, but to lay siege to it, to deprive it of oxygen, to shame it, to mock it with our art, our music, our literature, our stubbornness, our joy, our brilliance, our sheer relentlessness, and our ability to tell our own stories. Stories that are different from the ones we're being brainwashed to believe. The corporate revolution will collapse if we refuse to buy what they are selling. Their ideas, their version of history, their wars, their weapons, their notion of inevitability. Remember this, we be many and they be few. They need us more than we need them. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. And in another writing, Ms. Roy said, to love, to be loved, to never forget your own insignificance, to never get used to the unspeakable violence and the vulgar disparity of life around you, to seek joy in the saddest places, to pursue beauty to its lair, to never simplify what is complicated or complicate what is simple, to respect strength, never power, above all, to watch, to try and understand, to never look away, and to never, never forget. Our opening hymn this morning is We Would Be One.
And let me find my place here. Now is the time when we share our joys and sorrows. We are a community that holds one another in our celebrations and in our pain. Please share your joys and sorrows in the chat box, in Zoom. Know, please, that whatever your heart is holding today, we are with you. Okay, well, for the joys and sorrows shared, and I know you may have others that you didn't share, please, as you hold those in your heart, know that we are with you. Especially recall several shared today. Bob's son, Mike, is finally getting married at age 60. Excitement about that. And Lynn's friend is losing her mom. Looking forward to traveling. Some people are traveling, apparently. I think Jeff's out with his family in New Mexico. And birthdays and just all the concerns there are about family and love. We hold these, all the biggest feelings, in our hearts. And now it's the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts support our work that this church does. The work is summarized in our covenant. And the covenant says, in the service of the values that unite us, we will recognize the inherent value of each person, foster a community of compassion and caring for all, value our diverse opinions, and engage respectfully in all interactions. If you would like to give to this morning's offering, you can give online at canandaigua.org/connections/donate, or physically by mailing a check to the church. In either case, please note you'd like your gift to go toward the Sunday offering or your pledge. We'll share 25% of our monthly Sunday offerings with our service partner chosen by Team 6 for this muddy season, which is the Women's Foundation of Genesee Valley, an organization with the goal to promote economic self-sufficiency for women and girls through grant making, education, and advocacy. Thank you for your generosity.
Our centering words this morning are a poem by Pablo Neruda called Keeping Quiet. Now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still for once on the face of the earth. Let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would not look at his hurt hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it's about. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves. Now I will count to 12 and we will all keep quiet.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
Last December, in the season of darkness leading up to and away from the winter solstice, I found myself contemplating the teachings of a number of different religious traditions. The 7 principles of Kwanzaa, the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, which means our responsibility to repair the world, the 10 commandments of the Christian tradition, and others. Each tradition lays out a concrete path to peace, echoing themes of community, creativity, responsibility, accountability, and faith. Buddhism's central teaching might be simply, be kind. Teachings attributed to the Sufi sect of Islam include the idea that different religions are different ways to reach God, and therefore one should respect all religions. As I read the teachings of these diverse traditions, I noticed resonance with the central principles of Unitarian Universalism, the tradition that I practice: equity, compassion, justice, responsibility to the earth and all of her inhabitants, diversity, inclusion, and the right of each person to freely and responsibly search for truth and meaning. So I wondered, how is it that when most people of the world claim some religion to guide their lives, and most of these traditions teach that people should not kill or envy, should not lust after or covet, should not control others, how is it that we find ourselves in a state of perpetual non-peace? We've just passed the spring equinox last Sunday, one of 2 days in the year when the hours of daylight roughly equal those of night. And we're gaining more light each day until the culmination at the summer solstice. We human animals have similar cycles. Like the planet at equinox, we as individuals occasionally come into periods or moments of balance, times when we feel our equilibrium return, when we can balance the light and dark sides of ourselves. Times when we know that the shadow emotions of anger, fear, cynicism, despair, hatred, and envy do not overpower the pure joy and lightness of loving, of being. In such moments, we may find ourselves filled with a sense of light and feelings of hope, generosity, optimism, and creativity. Our connectedness to the planet is reflected within us continually. We are each like the weather, at times stormy and fierce and angry, at other times sunny and clear and undisturbed. To see ourselves with the changeability built in, to know that we are capable of being at peace with ourselves and all creation, may help us in being peace. Being peace doesn't mean that we will always have peaceful circumstances around us, but rather that we can remain peaceful through difficult circumstances by setting an intention to add to the light of the world rather than to the darkness. There's a well-known parable often attributed to the Cherokee people that's now in question somewhat, the origin of this story, but it doesn't diminish the story itself. A grandfather is explaining to his grandson that there are 2 wolves who live inside each of us. One wolf's diet is hatefulness, coarseness, anger, apathy, and an aversion to all that is good in the world. The other wolf's diet consists of love, generosity, goodwill, and inclusion of all in the circle of acceptance and dignity. The grandfather explains that these two wolves are always fighting. His grandson asks, well, then which one wins? And the reply is, the one we feed. In December, we lost a giant of peace and reconciliation, Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa. Tutu fully embraced love and peace and joy, even while sometimes weeping openly over the suffering in the world. At one time, he literally put his life on the line in breaking up an angry mob, determined to burn to death a man who they believed was an apartheid spy. So we know that being peace doesn't mean that we'll always be safe or quiet or composed. Setting the intention to embody peace can mean that you feel afraid or are even physically harmed. One of my friends who took part in the protest against the killing of Daniel Prude in Rochester was fired upon and hit with a rubber bullet, causing her both physical and psychological injury. She was not alone in that experience. And many bore witness to the state-backed violence against the water protectors who gathered peacefully at Standing Rock, North Dakota in November of 2016 to block the Dakota Access oil pipeline. Being peace also doesn't mean that you will be liked, respected, or listened to. Many of us in the Unitarian Universalist organization have tried talking with those whose thinking differs radically from the UU principle that every single person deserves respect and dignity, and to be allowed to live their lives without fear. Being peace means standing for this idea, which sometimes means getting hurt, like getting water hosed, tear gassed, hit, or shot at during a demonstration. In the 1960s and 70s, those of us who cared about civil rights, the environment, the war in Vietnam, and the winner-take-all capitalism that was already threatening our planet and our souls, we were called peaceniks and hippies. The slogan, "Make love, not war," was ridiculed by those who seemed to have been hypnotized into thinking that the earth and all of her inhabitants were here simply for exploiting. We were told we were communists and slackers and wimps because we believed that going to war and killing people to teach people not to kill people was ludicrous. And maybe the violence wore us down. Maybe pain and fear got the better of us. Many of us with deep conviction during these early decades eventually gave way to the constant and loud messages of consumption and violence. We allowed ourselves to be caught in the trance of the so-called American dream, which was built on the nightmares of others. We didn't take to the streets when our dignity was compromised because our government no longer considered us citizens, but consumers. Our collective will eroded and our souls remained asleep as military aggression continued after Vietnam in Grenada, Iraq, Afghanistan, and more. We were willing to keep silent when we learned of torture and waterboarding on directives from our highest government and military officials. Until 2020, when people of color led the way, we did not speak out as police departments became militarized and weaponized against our own citizens. So in the midst of all this, the action and inaction, the soul unease and social dis-ease, how do we become peace? How do we begin anew to embody the intention of being an example of peace in the world? We can begin with ourselves. It sounds trite, but honestly, what would it take to make a commitment to talk to ourselves as kindly as we talk to those we dearly love? It's harder than it sounds. Most people haven't done this in so long that they don't know that it can bring, as perhaps nothing else can, an inner peace and a sense of integrity that enables them to move with confidence and radical kindness in the world. Last December, Rebecca Solnit and Heather Cox Richardson held a conversation on Facebook about Solnit's recent book, Orwell's Roses. At one point, they discussed the idea that authoritarian and totalitarian governments cannot control people who have a robust sense of self. A robust sense of self. The tyranny of the quantifiable, like gross domestic product, the stock market, which rises even as most of the citizenry falls deeper into despair and debt, standardized testing, one size fits all, profit margins, market shares, and the like, strips modern people of our humanity, our uniqueness, our passion about anything beyond our screens. Our robust, alive, changing sense of self gets replaced with a watered down, blurred and grainy still photo version of ourselves, a version that reflects nothing of who we are as human beings and who we were before we became convinced that our most admirable character traits were our work ethic, our productivity, and our part in keeping the machine churning out more and more stuff that we will eventually drown in. People who embody peace know that the noise, that constant loud narrative about doing, consuming, and so-called productivity is not what's interesting. They know that their value comes from an inner source, an upwelling in the creative expression of their unique selves and talents. They know that they are free to wander outside the circles of constant chatter, sound bites, phrases that have no meaning, and friends in name only. Being peace means being able to claim your own value and to see the unique value in others. People at peace don't want to hurt others or deny others a share of the commons. The people of peace build each other up. They are kind. They're filled with humor and joy and optimism, even in the darkest of circumstances. They catch themselves when they are unkind and immediately move toward apology and reconciliation. Peaceful people engender more peaceful people by modeling love and inclusion and celebration of the diverse life here on earth. To represent peace means to stand for something far greater than the absence of war, arguing, strife, or discord. Being peace goes far beyond the absence of destruction. Joanna Macy, scholar, activist, and author, has written that it means looking our tendency toward destruction straight in the eye and grieving even as we declare our wild love for the world. Being peace means loving this world to the point of tears when we feel the pain of the turmoil, meanness, and harm to the beings of this planet and recognize those as our own being. In every religious tradition and in our own time, there are teachers who tell us in words and by example what it means to embody peace. It is the call to each of us to become the best version of ourselves and to hold out our hands to help those still stumbling along. Poet and author Mary Oliver knew exactly what her role was and what she had to give through her poems, which are love letters to the world. Here is one titled Messenger. My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the quickening yeast, there the blue plums. Here the clam deep in the speckled sand. Are my boots old? Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. The phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture, and the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing since all the ingredients are here, which is gratitude to be given a mind and a heart and these body clothes, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy to the moth and the wren, to the sleepy dug up clam, telling them all over and over how it is that we live forever. I lost my other screen. I think our closing hymn is One More Step.
One more step. We will take one more step. Till there is peace for us and everyone. We'll take one more step. One more word. We will say one more word. Till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word. One more prayer. We will say one more prayer. Till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer. One more song. We will sing one more song. Till every song is sung. We'll sing one more song.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Now we will extinguish our chalice. I hope I can help you to see it here. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And thank you everyone for joining this morning. We invite you to stay for coffee hour, our virtual coffee hour after the service. You will soon see an invitation to join a breakout room and be able to unmute your microphones when the light